Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Able Voices podcast. I'm Dr. Rhoda Bernard, founding managing director of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education, and I am proud to present this podcast featuring disabled artists and arts educators. We are inviting artists with disabilities to be guest hosts for the Able Voices podcast. The guest host for this episode is actor and musician Noah Britton. Noah Britton is a singer, songwriter, guitarist, clothing designer, performance artist, and comedian. In 2010, he co-founded the first comedy troupe composed of people with Asperger syndrome, Aspergers Are Us, who have performed over 150 shows in 10 countries. In his spare time, he is a psychology professor and has worked directly with people on the autism spectrum since 2005.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Able Voices podcast. I'm Noah Britton. I'm the guest host for this episode, and I'm very, very happy to present this podcast featuring artists with disabilities. And today we have the incredible Glen Maganzini from several bands around Boston over the years, G. Gordon Gritty being his solo project, and Johnny and the Foodmasters being his punk rock oldies cover band. Glen has been featured on the Toucher and Rich radio show and had press written about him all over the world, and has been a true force of nature, inspiring people all over Boston for the last 10 years at least. So welcome. Hi, Glen. How are you?
Noah, nice to see you and nice to hear you. Thanks for having me. That was quite a humbling introduction.
Well, it's always a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
So I guess the first thing is, let's hear about your artist trajectory. When did you start making things in a creative context?
Oof. This is creatively, it didn't, I was a bit of a late bloomer because
Hmm.
I had always related to things more with numbers and lists and sequences. Black and white was always my favorite kind of stuff, not thinking outside the box. I really
Hmm.
stuck within the lines. I tried to follow all the rules. And then, so that was for all the way through high school. And then once I
Hmm.
got to college, that's when I really started to hone in on my artistic abilities, which I never knew I had. I didn't even know what art really was because I always try to stay away from it.
So this is, of course, something you and I have in common, both being on the autism spectrum, and of course, all that black and white thinking is a super common part of growing up autistic. I had a lot of that too.
Hmm.
But you always made music. You were always interested in music even before you got to college, right?
Yeah, so I started out in hip hop, rap arena. When in high school, I started to rap with a friend of mine who also was on the spectrum, and this person was very shy, and they really liked to make beats, and I really liked to rap. So we combined forces at that time. It was really just us, and we posted things on MySpace. So I guess actually, I know I often overlook this period of
Hmm.
my journey, but that was that really does count as something that shouldn't be.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't even know about that.
yeah, exactly. I tend to. Yeah, it's. I don't know why I selectively forget that. I think because it was such a small part of my hobbies in life, but
Hmm.
it was pretty important.
And so after you got to college, you felt sort of an expansion of your world. And what made you decide, I'm going to look at this in a real creative way instead of just trying to do the by the numbers, fill in the blank stuff?
I think what happened was I was starting to go to a lot of shows that were a bit more experimental, and I could see people doing it themselves. And it was
Hmm.
great to witness the fact that you didn't need to necessarily know what you were doing or kind of operate within the traditional musician landscape in order to
Who was it who opened your eyes in this way?
probably the first uh, Jimmy Lee Lindsay Jr., who he really was
Mm,
he was from Memphis, Tennessee, was probably the one that he did everything by himself solo a lot in his bedroom. He got
mhm,
started when he was young, so his journey was kind of similar to mine. And I
mhm,
realized that even if I tried to make music that sounded like his, I was never going to
mhm,
be able to. So it would
mhm,
end up being its own thing. Do you see what I
mhm.
mean? So like
Totally.
you become a unique personality by trying to like be like the people that inspired you, but in it all,
Mhm,
it just ended up being sort of a unique thing to me. And as I was like re-listening to
mhm,
it, it just never felt. I always was uncomfortable with kind of being lumped within the musician, hence like all the I'm not a musician, still not a musician stuff, just because I would go and see other performers and listen to other music, and I just be like, I what I'm doing just doesn't really feel right to be included in this context. Not that it wasn't
mhm.
actually music, but it just the spirit of it felt beyond just whatever I was listening. So that's kind of what.
Yeah. That's a really insightful way to phrase how you live as an artist, because what you do so well is you really, really operate outside the box as an artist. And again, I think there are people who are going to say what you do isn't music, and it's, they don't really see it even the way that you do. But I know, and and the people who love your work know that you have a different goal, I think, than all the bands that make music do, right? That's not what you're interested in.
Yeah, it often seems like even I wouldn't even consider myself, and even though I'm technically in a couple of bands, I wouldn't say I'm in any bands.
Mm-hmm.
If that if you're
It's
picking up what I'm
Yeah,
putting down
totally.
there.
It's very much like how Andy Kaufman always said, "I'm not a comedian, I'm a song and dance man." Because in his
Mm,
mind, comedy was, the goal is to make people laugh, whereas he wanted to make people uncomfortable and entertain himself. And there's a very different way of looking at it. And I feel like your
yeah.
music, absolutely, the point isn't to make people have something that sounds good. It's a very, very different goal, and it makes it so much more fun.
Yes, like I can't imagine anyone actually listening. Like when you say that you listen, whenever, like for example, you just said to me the other day that you listened to a new song that I put online,
Mm-hmm.
and I I wouldn't expect anyone to get past a few seconds just
Mm-hmm.
because it feels so personal. It doesn't feel like it's meant for public consumption. So
Mm-hmm.
like it always blows my mind that people actually listen to it because I don't think it doesn't. If they don't listen to it, that would be that would seem to be the more normal quote unquote thing to do. But
Mm-hmm.
I believe people that at least have an open mind and know what you know are excited to be a part of the journey. Those are the ones that are probably gonna get something out of it.
That's a beautiful way to look at it, and I think that's very true. One of Glenn's bands, Johnny and the Foodmasters, I just saw a few days ago, and they only do covers from the 50s, 60s, and occasionally the 70s or 80s, but they're just covered in noise, a lot of which is Glenn playing guitar. And Glenn, do you know what your guitar is going to sound like before you play any notes?
No, I'm pretty much reacting in real time to everything going on around me. So,
Well, I guess what I mean is, like, before you press down on a string, do you have a sense of what sound it's going to make?
oh, yeah, generally, like I know. Well, that's interesting. If it depends, it's weird. It's like yes in 100% and then 0%. Like I totally know all that it's gonna sound like, and I also don't know any of it.
Do you mean how generally it's going to be very noisy, but the specific note you don't know?
No, they're all yeah, they're all pretty much the same to me. Like,
Okay.
come
Yeah.
on, like let's be for real. There's six of them
Mhm.
there, and that's why like
Mhm.
sometimes I'll just throw the guitar on the ground and just let other people play, or just play upside down, left-handed. There's
Mhm.
just trying to feel it out in different ways. Just the traditional kind of playing of it is pretty, yeah, it's kind of boring. I'll leave that up for people like you.
I
No, no,
don't
I
think
mean
I can do that
in a
either.
good way.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, but no, it's true. Like Glenn is a great showman. It's very hard not to be captivated by Glenn's performance in any band, even if you don't want to listen to the absolute cacophony that's happening. And I want to talk about G. Gordon Gritty as well, because this is more your solo project, but then you have a backing band that varies in size. Is that right?
Yeah, the backing band, there's three people that have played for a while now, maybe for like 5 or 6 years, a consistent crew, and then there's been
Hmm.
additions, and if someone can't make it, that's fine. Like it's a
Hmm.
loosey goosey kind of thing. It's not like if someone in the
Do,
band can't make it, it won't go on situation.
does G. Gordon Gritty practice?
So G Gordon Gritty doesn't practice, but
Hmm.
we do jam. The the distinguishment must be made. I don't know if that's is distinguishment a word?
No, but that's okay. Everyone knows what
Okay,
you
that's
mean.
fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you know what I'm saying? So it's pretty much it's the way we do it is just to recreate the way that I made my own albums, which was just layering instruments on top of each other. So it'll always start with
Hmm.
my vocals and guitar, and then everyone
Hmm.
else can sort of fill in the blanks how they please.
Hmm. Hmm.
So there's yeah,
Yeah.
as
So
opposed to like
jams.
a yeah, as opposed to like a practice where you would think if something was kind of off, I'd be like, "Hey guys, let's run through this one again."
Hmm.
I don't think
Hmm.
we've ever
Okay.
really done that for the purpose of, correcting for as a corrective measure, or to um,
Yeah.
kind of
And
get
so
it
it's
like
really
in
spontaneous and it's very present and of the moment always.
certainly, yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
very of the
Do
moment,
you practice your songs though? And do you practice your parts when you're playing your songs?
like alone.
Yeah.
So a lot of the songs I've been playing for years, almost like a decade now. I don't really
Mhm.
do too many new songs. Like
Mhm.
occasionally, occasionally there might be some, and there have been
Mhm.
over the years that I think you've taken a liking to in particular. But as far as relearning songs, you ever hear of the app Chordify?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I put some of I usually put old songs in there, and they'll spit back what chords it should be. And since I
Yep.
only know the basic chords, I'll usually end up playing, you know, a variation of the original song, and then just kind of
Mhm.
go with that. So it'll never yeah, it's never going to be how it was in the beginning, which
Right.
may be sad, but maybe it's happy too.
Well, no, I think it's better. It's more present, like you take everything jam bands want and you actually do it in a way that appeals to me as someone who really
There we
hates
go.
the concept of a groove. And I think it like this speaks to uh the next question, which is about your experiences as a person with autism, as an artist with autism. I mean, do you feel like this style of making art is specifically autistic?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I
That
think
that
so
was
too.
definitely one. Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah, you've pointed that out. And I've I definitely think the people that want to be involved typically are autistic
Mhm.
in some, they're on the spectrum,
Mhm. Yeah,
because
I
it's
think that's true.
relatable. And even just
Mhm.
people in general that kind of, it even extends beyond the music sphere a lot of the times. The people that you can kind of connect to and relate to at least I found,
Yeah.
have been
Yeah.
other people on the spectrum.
Totally. I looked around at the Johnny and the Foodmasters audience and I thought, this is everybody I know in Boston pretty much. And there's a lot of Aspies here. And
Yeah.
that's not a coincidence,
No,
and
totally.
we all
Yeah, there could.
enjoy it.
I'm sure there could be some more out there that.
I know. We got to bring the autistic underground out to more people, you
Yeah,
know.
because I've met a fair number of people where I think they could be converted. It just takes
Mhm.
maybe some cool experiences. I think you
Mhm.
bring that out in a lot of people with all of your work
Thanks,
is
man.
just bringing that. Um, people can relate to it that might not relate to just your regular stuff. But I mean
Mhm.
that's not entirely true. But you know,
But no, I appreciate that. And same, I mean, you're such a great uniter of people, regardless of who they are, but particularly people who really want to live in a world where there aren't rules about what you can and can't do as an artist. And so, how many places have banned you? Do you know even?
yeah, there's been at least a handful that just it just wasn't if they didn't explicitly ban, it was more of like you're never going to go back there again, and like people are going to
Mm-hmm.
probably keep
Sure.
tabs on that, like
Mm-hmm.
we don't
Mm-hmm.
need to mention the names, but it's just
What were some of the things that you did that made this happen? I mean, just as a performer, like I want to give the audience a sense of what it is that you are doing on stage that would get you banned from a club so they know how really exciting and unpredictable your shows are.
the performance aspect of it is probably something that might a lot of places might think is over the top. Like
Mhm.
I'm not afraid to go into the audience and start
Yep.
playing, and just sort of being lying on the ground, really doing anything other than standing still, and all at the same time, just with loud noises and coming through, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it always boggles my mind because it's like people. I think people. I would, if I was a spectator, I would be like, oh, this is, it might not be the usual, but I would think this could be cool for our venue. This could be like a little different. Let's change it up a
Mhm.
bit. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's been times where like, 70, 50 people, place was packed, like a bar was packed with people, and then we'd get on and just, people would leave, a mass exodus.
Mhm.
But then there'd always be, not everyone left is the main, that's something
Mhm.
that people could
Right.
take away. It wasn't everyone.
Yep. You filter out the people who don't like it, and then the people who like it are great.
Exactly, actually. It's a great filtering mechanism.
It's a kind of a microcosm of what it is to have Asperger's and to socially interact.
It filters. Yeah.
It prevents us from having to spend time together. Yeah, totally. Um,
Yeah,
so
definitely.
a couple other questions. I want to also mention you talk about how, your album first was I'm Not a Musician, and the follow up album was Still Not a Musician. And um, what would you
Yeah.
consider yourself?
As far as the genre,
I mean, well, you're not a musician, so what would you say you do?
well, as an ex-bandmate said, you're just a bleeping accountant.
I think that's a good
So
way to phrase it because you are
I've
literally an
all
accountant.
yeah, exactly. So I've always like yeah, if that I think
hmm
that's more of what I am than a
hmm
musician certainly. Like
But of course, that doesn't do you justice at all any more than musician does. I mean, you literally are an accountant, that's what you do, and you love it and you're good at it. But of course, as an artist, as a performer, what you do is really closer to, just pro wrestling in terms of how much of a spectacle it becomes.
oh, that's awesome. Yeah, just right, it's just entertainment. Would that be fair?
You're a real
I've always liked
entertainer.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, just
totally.
entertainment. That's
Totally.
something that doesn't
So
seem like it. Yeah, it's not limited to just the actual act of making music or performing. It's like entertainment.
so do you know any You know a few chords? Like, you could actually play a G or whatever on
Yeah,
purpose?
I know the yeah. No, actually, when I first the funny thing about it is because I was so, and I don't know if you could relate to this. I never really got to talk to anyone about this in particular. Is that when I was first starting out, I was very, I kind of treated it like, um, very seriously. I was looking up all the chord
Mhm.
charts. I was looking up the
Right.
tabs. I was trying to
Yeah.
follow along so much
Yeah,
to
same.
everything that, like, in the early days, I did pick up like quite a bit. Um, but
Mhm.
then very after I struggled for like the first couple years with trying to learn songs and it just wasn't working out. I just immediately pulled the plug on that. But it is interesting, like I kind of treated my early musicianship, so to speak, similarly to, other endeavors that I would not think of as being artistic.
Right. Just following
Yeah.
the paint by number stuff, yeah.
Yes, the paint by numbers.
And
When
then
I
you had the
failed,
breakthrough like Jackson Pollock, right?
yes.
Where you
Yeah,
realize
where
it
you're
can
just
be
like,
chaos and beautiful. Yeah.
yeah, and that no matter what you do, like every single note will count as something.
Mhm.
And then there's like so many, you can just do whatever you want on top of that. And then from there, you're golden. So those first couple albums, which was, yeah, it's just all exactly like that.
It's such a beautiful way to do it. 'Cause there's the people who make really, like, serious, planned, controlled noise, and you're the exact opposite of them. You know, you have as much in common with them as you do with Maroon 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I had a couple other questions about your specific work. So, first one is,
All
why
right.
did you record the song where you rap in Spanish? What made you decide to do that?
So that song was actually a re-recording. I That song where I rapped in Spanish was that song when I was 15 with my friend Tommy.
Why did you make that in the first place? Just to be, like, Big Pun or whatever?
I did that in the first place because I was really into rap at that time. It was for sure
Mm.
my favorite genre.
Cool.
And I really liked Translator, and
Okay.
my buddy who wrote the lyrics, had all of these lyrics about strong redemption arcs. Like it was pretty intense. He was like a very devout Christian, yet
Okay.
he always says he was a good boy gone bad. And I didn't
Okay.
really get it because like we never left the house. So it
Mm.
was always very confusing, like how he actually went bad.
Hmm.
But I was
Yeah.
intrigued by it. So I sort of, yeah, I
So
think I took
you
his lyrics and then put them through Translator, and
wow.
that's how it came out to be kind of a Spanglish, mostly Spanish.
You translated using, like, weak translation, somebody else who was trying to be something he was not, essentially. Is
Yes.
that's so interesting, and then the result is something
Yes, no,
completely
exactly.
unique. And, like, this, you know, because it's very hard not to laugh at some of the stuff you do on stage. Like, when you pulled that song out, I was dying laughing with other people because it's like, "Where did this come from?" Like, in a million years, I would never imagine that Glenn would be rapping in
Yes,
Spanish because you don't rap very much, and you definitely have never spoke Spanish at all on stage. And
for
so,
sure.
how much of what you do is intentionally getting that reaction versus just you don't even think about it and you're not concerned about whether it gets that kind of response?
It gets into that weird territory where, yeah, it's funny. Like let's
Okay.
let's just say it's funny, but I don't know what's necessarily gonna land. So
Okay.
I can't say like, oh, like I'm gonna bust out these things. A lot of the times it's gonna be spontaneous in that moment. I know that I have that song at my because it's stuck in my brain. I'll never be able to forget it since the time I
Mhm.
said it. Like it's like almost
Okay.
like something you memorize in school.
Sure, but it's something you know is funny and you pull it out because you're like, "This'll work right now. This'll be funny."
This is something that I want to do right now, but it's interesting because no one's ever talked about it or asked about it like you just did now. Like it's weird. I've
Mhm.
performed that one so many times and no one's ever commented. So I've always been under the impression that it was just like, it was just like all the other songs and didn't really.
It is in some ways, but just it's unique in that you're not doing Spanish or rap much otherwise, and so that's the surprise. But I guess, I mean, is that something
Yeah.
where you're consciously like, "Okay, this will be funny and weird," or I guess if not, what is your impetus to decide to perform a particular song?
Wow. Yeah, no, definitely it's whatever I'm feeling in that moment. And it's like some of the shows there will be like I will come to the band and be like, "All right, guys, we're gonna jam on all these new old ones that I wrote in 2013 that we never performed before. We're just gonna do them."
Mhm.
And there'll be a lot of the shows kind of there's always gonna be something because you have to have that outlook. And I don't know if you can relate to this.
Mhm.
Like even when you're performing, I always kind of have in my mind that somebody will care or
Mhm.
somebody will be like super interested and geek out, create like hard.
Mhm. Mhm. Sure, that's the best feeling when that happens.
Yeah, that they're, you know what I mean? So if you have that
Yeah.
in mind, you really feel like you can work with a broad palette.
Nice. That's a cool way to look at it. So, do you have a sense when you're doing stuff, like when you walk outside with your guitar, like leaving the building, like obviously the people in the show aren't going to hear you when you're doing this. Like, do you have a sense that like
Mm.
I'm going to just sort of make it, you know, weird for them, or is it more just like I don't want to be in this room, I'm going to go outside?
Yeah, exactly. Like I kind of got sick of just performing inside, and I have the wireless capabilities. Or
Mhm.
even if I don't, if I'm sort of like done with this, you oftentimes see me, I'll just pack up before the band has stopped playing, just because it
Mhm.
takes me a long time to end. Or,
Mhm.
however I'm feeling, if I'm just sick of it all, I'll just
Mhm.
end or just kind of like
Mhm.
tell everyone, be like, stop, or like,
Yep.
I kind of,
Yeah,
yeah.
like Elvis Costello
And
on
then the people,
SNL. There's no
yeah,
reason to do this
exactly.
song now. Yeah, because you really
Yeah,
understand what you're doing and you believe in it in a way that a lot of people don't, where they'll be like, "Ah, this isn't working, I'm gonna change it up," and that's not how you approach it at all, and I have a lot of respect for that.
yes.
Um,
Everything is done to the best it can be done.
I think we're running out of time, so I wanna ask you a
Oh,
couple more
certainly.
quick questions. What's next for you as an artist? What are you working on now?
Yeah, so I don't work on new things, but I just like I do and I don't. I hate to say that. Like I never know what I'm gonna do, but
Mhm.
the biggest thing now is I'm doing this project where I'm compiling on a global scale all contemporary punk music. And
Wow.
it's gonna take me forever, like, but I'm really trying to connect everyone.
Uh-huh.
And like I started, like people can go to it right now. It's called neocities.com. Sorry,
Mhm.
neocities.org/weirdpunk.
Yep. Okay.
So that's my big project. As far as my own stuff, people are just gonna have to wait and see. Really, it's
I don't
you
see
never
anything
know.
on this website you just gave me. It's neocities.org/weirdpunk. Does this not
Yeah.
exist?
Oh, it
It's ne
better, or else I've
ne
done something wrong.
Neo cities, like NEO cities?
Yeah. Oh, it's weirdpunk.neocities.org.
Oh, okay.
Sorry
Okay. Good to
for all
know.
those
I'm
who are
glad we
following
corrected that.
along. But yeah.
So yeah, because the other thing Glenn does amazingly is he really brings people together. And, he just booked the Ramalama Ding Dong Fest, which he's done for a long time and is continuing to, and it always brings really interesting, diverse acts together and interesting, diverse audiences together who probably wouldn't get to meet except for this wonderful festival. And
Yes.
I want to ask one
Thank
more
you for that.
question before we run out of time. What advice would you give to young autistic artists?
Oh, so much advice, but if I have to keep it
Yeah,
brief,
a little short.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would just say just go for it. Don't care what anybody thinks. Whatever you do is perfect, and to give it a try. Don't
Mm-hmm.
get too caught up in the numbers. I
Mm-hmm.
know it's hard, or like, this is just think of it as this is your time to shine outside of those other areas of your life where you're so dedicated to, following what's right and,
Mm-hmm.
what you ought to do. Think of this artistic journey as something that you can totally go anywhere with, and I really mean that.
That's beautiful, and that's a perfect ending. Thank you so much, Glenn. This has been really fascinating for me as someone who's known you for a long time, and I hope for
I,
everybody else. So thank you,
I
Berklee.
appreciate it,
And
Noah.
yeah, it
Thank
was
you,
a
Berklee.
pleasure.
Able Voices is a production of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education, led by me, Dr. Rhoda Bernard, the founding managing director. It is produced by Daniel Martinez del Campo. The intro music is by Kai Levin, and our closing song is by Sebastian Batista. Kai and Sebastian are students in the arts education programs at the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education. If you would like to learn more about our work, find us online at berkeley.edu/BIAAE or email us at BIAAE@berkeley, that's LEE.edu.